I was above the law because I was the law. There were situations where we paid $1 million cash, green cards for girlfriends, making guys disappear from their families. I got myself into a jam. I'm going to catch this terrorist. I'm going to ride off on a white horse. I'm going to be the hero again. And I ended up the GOAT. My name is Bob Lustyik. I grew up in a small town in New York, Tarrytown, New York. I come from a law enforcement family. My father actually, in the beginning of his career, was a CO. My uncle is the highest decorated New York State trooper in the history of the New York State Police. And there's actually a bronze statue of him outside their academy. My other uncle was also a state trooper. My younger brother is a retired police officer. And so we've always been civil servants. And we were
Right.
raised to be civil servants. My father's motto was always, you measure a man's success in his life not by how many dollars he touches, but by how many lives he touches. So we weren't really focused on careers that were like huge money makers. We were always, raised to be pushed towards careers that were huge impact makers.
Okay. So you always kind of felt like you were going to go into law enforcement?
Yes, actually, it's a funny story. I was watching a movie with my dad when I was about 9 years old, and it was the FBI story, starring Jimmy Stewart. It's like the old original, and my father said, that's something I always wanted to do, but I took the CO job because I had been born with a cleft palate, and my dad kind of had to put all his aspirations on hold in order to get a job that had immediate like health benefits, and because I had to go through 19 surgeries to correct my cleft palate.
Whoa.
So they were young. They were young, and he kind of put everything on hold in his career, and did what he had to do to take care of me and my older sister. So that day, when I heard my dad say that that's what he wanted to do, I always went through life wanting to make him proud of me. So I always pushed myself towards going into the FBI.
Okay. How did that happen? Like, I mean, what is there a specific course that you kind of think you follow that like I need to have some military background, or I need to be a police officer for at least 4 years, or I mean, is there, or I need to have a law. It used to be, like having a law degree really helped. Like, what was the criteria that you thought you should follow
Okay,
to get that
so
done?
just for your viewers, if you want to go into the FBI, they have different categories of how they view their applicants. There's like science and technology, there's law, there's accounting, and then there's like diversified. There might be some more categories now since I've been retired since 2012. So you're measured against the applicants in that specific category. So I pushed myself towards a science background, knowing that it would put me in a category where there weren't that many applicants. And also, I was uh, pushed myself through athletics because I figured if they are in the science category, they're probably not also going to be athletic. I know that's a stereotype, but worked out.
Sometimes stereotypes are stereotypes because
It
they're
worked
true.
out. So, I had been a small town high school football star. I went on to play college football at a smaller school, and I was fortunate enough to be on a championship team. And it's funny because during my FBI interview, I had my championship ring on, and the agents just wanted to talk about that. They were like, "Oh, what's that ring? That's a bull ring. It's huge. You know, can I try it on?" And literally, that was the extent of my interview. Um, I I I had a environmental science, and a dual major in environmental science and theology. And when I got out of college, I worked for the Westchester County Department of Labs and Research for 3 years. And during that time period, I applied to the FBI, and I had made it in under the diversified program, and then also under the science program. So one day I was working in the lab, and I was working on an experiment that was like a pretty big deal for the county of Westchester regarding pesticides in drinking water. And the phone rang, and it was the FBI recruiter, and he said, "Hey, Bob, great news. You're going to be put in the next academy class." And I said, "When is that?" And he said, "Monday." And it was Thursday. And I said, "I'm in the middle of a grant program where I'm working on, this big project for the county. I have to at least give them 2 week notice." And he said, "Well, I can't guarantee the spot's going to be there in 2 weeks." So I walked into my boss and I said, "Hey, I'm going to go home for lunch and I'm not coming back." And he was like, "Wait, what?" Now, he had known that I had applied
Right.
because the FBI, when you apply, your background check, I mean, they literally go all the way back to your kindergarten teacher if they're still alive. And, he said, "Hey, good luck." I went. I went home. Friday, I bought a new car because I didn't think my clunker would make it down to Quantico, Virginia from New York. Packed up my stuff, and Sunday I was walking into the FBI Academy. So
How long was that? How long's the academy?
back then it was 14 weeks, which is kind of ironic because in my line of work, I was a counterintelligence officer, and my whole job was to go up against intel officers from other countries, hostile intel services that were trying to, hurt the United States national security wise. And a lot of these people that I ended up recruiting to flip and work for the US had been trained one on one for 5, 6, 7 years. And here we are, the leading law enforcement agency, allegedly, in the world, even. And we only get 13 weeks. I think now it's 16 weeks of training. So it's kind of
Yeah.
ironic.
Um, okay. So I mean, once you graduated, where'd you go from there? Like, where was your first assignment?
Okay, so in the FBI, not many people want to go to high cost of living areas. And New York was like the place nobody wanted to go. I mean, when I was at the academy, I realized how unpopular and frightening New York was to other states, people from other states. Like the people that were in the academy class from what, Montana or out west, or all these states, I don't even know where they are. They were terrified to get stationed in New York. So New Yorkers had the option to ask to go back to New York, and 99.9% of the time you would get that assignment. So that's what I did, and I ended up getting posted back to the New York FBI office down on Broadway and Worth, downtown. So
So
I was home. I was in New York City, and I literally stayed there almost my entire career with a couple. I had a undercover assignment where I went out to Monterey, California, but I did travel for work. But most of the time, my main base was the New York office.
So what was your assignment like when you go into you go in, like they don't immediately put you into undercover work, right? I
No,
mean,
no. So when my first day in the office, I walked to the squad I was assigned to, and they were a counterintelligence squad working against a hostile intel service, and there was nobody there but the secretary. And I was gung ho. I was Special Agent Robert Lustyik, reporting for duty,
right,
and the secretary was like an old school Queens girl who basically said, "I don't give a rat's ass who you are. Get out of my face and go find a desk." And I was kind of like taken aback by that and kind of wandered in the squad area. And there was a desk that had nothing on it. So I took it as my own, but I couldn't open it up. It was locked and there were no keys. So back then, the New York office was not really a great place. So I literally lifted the plastic parchment off the top of the desk. And for like 5 years, that's how I got in my desk. I just would tear the top off. It was hysterical. And the reason that my squad wasn't around is back then, it was 1988. Back then, they were all working the Robert Hansen case. So
Why does that sound familiar?
Robert Hansen was the FBI agent that got,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Oh, I watched that. Did he die recently?
I'm not sure.
Um, yeah, God, he's responsible for a ton of people in like the Soviet Union getting murdered, right? Like
Yeah,
he was
a lot of our sources disappeared.
yeah, I've actually watched a couple documentaries on it. And I remember one of the things they were talking about was as far as espionage for the CIA was just gutted by him for 20 years, right? He was just like he just destroyed it. And um yeah, it's funny too because I guess they always felt like it was somebody in the CIA that was a mole, and it wasn't. It was a guy in the FBI. And he was kind of a loser too, you know? Like he and his wife and the whole thing, and he got caught at a drop, didn't he? Like a dead drop or something. He went to go pick up. Yes, that whole story is just a sleazy scumbag story of him and just wanting the money, and Soviets were promising him everything too, right? Like, didn't he think he had a villa and a bunch of land waiting for him in the Soviet Union? And
But I mean, that's how that game goes. I was fortunate enough to be involved in maybe altogether a dozen recruitments, and you offer them a lot, and you
right,
give them what you can, and you promise them the world, and you hope you can come through,
right,
and you manipulate them to cooperate with you because in the counterintelligence world, the priorities are backwards. So arrest is like the worst. You want to recruit, you want to neutralize, and then you want to arrest. If you have to arrest, you're basically saying, "Hey, I failed at my true job, and I just got to clean up the mess with an arrest." So when you see like spies being arrested, it usually means that there was either a supervisor who wanted to move up the ladder, so he had that arrest be made, or the agents tried to recruit the individual and it didn't work out.
right.
So,
So, um, so when you typically when they promise these guys everything, do you feel does the FBI usually deliver?
how it normally works, or how it worked with cases that I worked or was involved in, is we would do the initial recruitment, the FBI, and the ultimate goal is to recruit an individual, then have them go back to their headquarters and still work for us. And at that point, we would hand them over to the CIA. So my squad worked hand in hand. I worked hand in hand with the CIA for a decade. decades. And that's how our interagency would work. We would we're our mandate is we're not allowed to run sources overseas, and they're not allowed to run them in the U.S. Now, both sides get skewed, and we try to cooperate as much as we can. And there's always been that infighting, but I was fortunate enough to work with some really nice, talented CIA case officers, and we were able to get a lot accomplished. So we would hand them off, and then the promises that I made, they would try to come through with. There were situations where we paid, $1 million cash, hundreds of thousands of dollars, green cards for girlfriends, making guys disappear from their families and leaving with their new family, their new girl, all kinds of crazy stuff that you can't imagine. But we would get it done. We would get it
Right.
done.
Like, I mean, how long? Like, what were some of the cases that you worked that? I mean,
Um,
to the degree that you can talk about it, I'm assuming. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, no, I mean, generally, how the case would go is in New York. A lot of these missions, which is like a consulate, but in New York they call it a mission to the UN. Let's say they have it's mission A, and they have 100 diplomats that live in that mission or are assigned to that mission that work at the UN. 90 of them or 80 of them will be legitimate diplomats. 20 of them will be intelligence affiliated, and that'll be the intelligence station within that mission. So it'll range from people that are just like support, they call them code clerks, like in the movies. Um, they'll live like in a Faraday cage. I don't know if anybody ever saw the movie Enemy of the State with,
yeah, that's the
yeah.
first thing I think of when I think of that.
Yeah, so that Faraday cage is like a legit deal. Like that movie was pretty accurate as far as like how that cage was. So a code clerk or someone who's a support person would like live in that area, and they would be in charge of sending communications back and forth coming from the intel officers, whether it's their headquarters to the officer on the ground in New York or vice versa. So our job was to try to figure out of the 100 what 20 were intel, and then you would open investigations into them. And as someone who was, a recruiter, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term, I would try to figure out everything about them, and really, really see if they have vulnerabilities that I could exploit. And we would get pretty creative. I mean, there were times where we would get intel officers' wives jobs in an office that didn't really exist, and we would, you know, push them into having illicit affairs, so that the intel officer would kind of like have a nervous breakdown, and then he would go to a therapist that wasn't a real therapist, and then one day he's in front of his new friend who goes to the group therapy session, and all of a sudden the ID opens up and you say, hey, by the way, I'm not really who I said I was. You're kind of in a little bit of a pickle. Why don't you work for us? And then he flips. His wife goes into work on Monday. There's no office anymore. The whole place is shut down. All the 30 employees were all fake anyways. And, all the contracts she worked on weren't real. They were all supported through, undercover operations. And all of a sudden we got ourselves a spy working for us. But, it's like in the movies. It's actually even more involved. There were some great agents that had some great cases, and I suppose I was considered one of them because I won all kinds of accolades, awards, and was even Federal Law Enforcement Officer of the Year um, with my partner, and we worked some really great cases. But generally, it was it wasn't really like going to work. It was kind of like going to play because you come up with these creative ideas and then you try to figure out a way how to implement them.
I mean, it honestly sounds like running a scam.
It is a scam,
You know,
100%, 100% a scam. It's literally seeing what you can find out about someone and using it against them so that you can profit. Now, the profit isn't financial in this case. The profit's intellectual. It's information. It's you know uh, intelligence information from another service. So, is it a scam? Oh yeah, it's a legalized scam, and it comes under the guise of national security.
so what do you when you talk to these guys and they say, okay, I'll you know like I'll work for you? Do they what information is it that comes that they can really provide you? Like how it, I'm thinking how you know how specific is that information, and can you even act on it without putting them in jeopardy?
Well, that's part of the trick too, and it's a great question. That's part of the whole difficulty of the job. The first part of the question is answered by it depends what country the individual's from and what position they have. Take the example that I said. Hypothetically, if it's a code clerk, and this is someone who is receiving and decoding every secret message from their headquarters and handing it to a spy, and then getting reports from that spy and coding them and sending them out. If I have a code clerk or a secretary working for the government that I flipped, I get the golden egg. I get everything coming in and out of that intel station. So, in the world of recruitments, you always want to have the guy who's handling the telephone because he hears everything,
Right.
example wise. And then if it's a country that's considered hostile and you get an intel officer, they compartmentalize, meaning you'll have one guy who's like a science and technology officer, another guy who's like economic, another guy who's political, and their goal is to collect in that area. So you'll just get the information from that individual who works in that specific area. But you can figure out ways to move them up the chain so that they become more valuable to their own service. They get more access, and thus they give us more access.
I always think about the Enigma machine. Once they cracked um, the Nazis' code, it was like, okay, well, we know this ship's going to be attacked, but we can't act on it. We know this is about to happen, but we can't act on it.
Right.
Like they had to cherry pick which ones were, and they couldn't even really, in some cases, even divert. You can't really divert the ocean liner or the whatever the ship or whatever, because like nothing can change because they just didn't want to tip their hat. So they cherry pick, what was big enough to risk it and how.
And it's the exact same way today. You can collect all the intel that you want, but when the higher ups who have a bigger picture of everything going on, when they make their decision, that's a decision that you're going to go by. For example, hypothetically again, because I don't want to lay anything out that's going to get me sent back. Um, if I collect information on, say, Uganda and I have some great intel on Ugandan intelligence activities, and they're targeting people in the U.S., and I recruit a Ugandan intelligence officer, and he's telling me everything, and he tells me one thing that we really should act on. It's they call it actionable intelligence. I'll say, hey, can we pull the plug or pull the trigger on this and forward the operation into this new arena based on the information we were provided. And they'll sometimes come back and say, no, we're not going to do anything. And they don't tell you, but you'll find out later on that the reason is the reciprocity issue, meaning like if we yank a Ugandan intel officer out of New York and there's a CIA officer in Uganda, they're gonna have reciprocity and they're gonna yank that guy out. So based on what's going on in our other services is how the higher ups will determine whether or not they're going to act on the intel. And that is also comes down to protecting the source of the information. Sometimes there's Robert Hanson's, and you want to be able to have it so compartmentalized that if it does get leaked, it'll look like the leak came from the faucet, not the toilet.
Right. So when the Robert Hansen thing, culminated, like, were you there?
Meaning, like,
Were
in
you
the
in the
arrest?
department? You said that they were at that point when you first got there, they were all over that case. Like, were they still investigating that case, or had it already collapsed? Or
I mean, they were working in that area. That's what I'll say.
okay.
Mm.
So okay. So I was just wondering if you were working in that department when they ultimately arrested him.
I I was not
Oh,
involved in the arrest. That was out of Washington, but my squad was doing some stuff.
what was the fallout after that for the FBI? Like,
It was it was a tough road. It was a tough road because a lot of sources, a lot of informants, a lot of confidential informants were put in a lot of danger, and there had to be a lot of cleanup. He that was a great win for the Russians. I'll put it that way. They got themselves a great win, and it was messy. It was really messy.
um, so how long? So what were you working on? What was the case that you were working on when your whole thing kind of went bad? Just wondering. I mean, unless you have anything else that you want to talk about before that.
No, no, I'll go right into that.
How
So
long? How long had you worked? Sorry, for the FBI before you started this case.
23 years
Whoa. Okay, and you have to work what 25 years before you can retire.
or be 50. So I retired at 24 years.
Oh, okay.
This case made me retire.
Okay.
So the background would be I hadn't been around for my family much because when you're an FBI agent, you're very busy and the job is time consuming. So I had missed a lot of stuff with our son, and I had always done community service. I had coached little league baseball, youth football, things like that. But now that our son was getting to the age where he could participate, I wanted to get back into it and coach him specifically and the teams that he would, be playing on. So my demise began when I took a transfer to an RA, a resident agency, a small office in Westchester County, so that I had a 10-minute commute home rather than, sometimes on a Friday night leaving downtown Manhattan, it would take 3 hours in the summer. So I was on a small squad, and it was as if I myself, the big fish, for lack of another way to describe it, I threw myself in a small pond. Heck,
Right.
I threw myself in a bird bath. And we were now only covering leads for big cases rather than having our own big cases. So for me, it was like shock, like investigative shock, because I was no longer the guy. I was just some guy who was like out there in the middle of nowhere. And if they needed, something done, they would cut me a lead and I would write it up and send it back to them. But I wasn't like the guy. I wasn't the case agent on big cases anymore. And sadly, my ego couldn't take it. So I had been asked to go talk to a college football team up in Rhode Island at Bryant University. My boyhood friend, was the head coach, and he asked me to come up and talk to the team, which I did.
For what purpose?
Just hey, stay out of trouble. Um, this is what you have to watch out for. If like motivational.
Okay.
So while I was there, I was on the sideline, and my friend said, "Hey, I want you to meet someone who's a football coach at a local private school, Lawrenceville Academy, and he's also a private investigator. And I want you to check him out and tell me if like he's the real deal, because he's looking to have a couple players here, and his firm is also looking to donate to the program." So that's where I met Michael Taylor. Michael Taylor is a former Green Beret who at the time had his own private investigative agency. I
Okay.
met him. I vetted him. He had actually worked with the FBI in the past, and he said, "Hey, I actually have some uh, amazing contacts in the Middle East if you're looking for some information." Well, for me, with what I was going through, all of a sudden I said, "Oh man, I might have one last big hurrah before I go
Right.
off and ride off into the sunset." So, I met with him a couple times and wrote up some of the information that he had provided from some of his sources that were in foreign intelligence services. And it was given high ratings by our analysts, and it was disseminated all throughout, the intel community. And I basically recruited him to work with me. He had information where we might be able to pin down one of the terrorists that was one of the cards in the deck of cards.
Okay.
So I was, looking at that saying, "Oh man, this could be real. This could be a great way to end my career." And one day he came to me and he said, "Hey, my lawyer doesn't want me to work with you anymore." And I was like, "What's up?" And he said, "It looks like my company is going to be indicted for contract fraud that occurred in Iraq, when he had a contract in Iraq providing security for the airport in Kandahar, I believe." Um, so I went
Well,
back to my,
why was he going to be indicted? Like overbilling
yeah,
or?
overbilling. Well, it
Okay.
was like, $4,000 toilet seat,
Yeah. Yeah.
that kind of thing. And that was going on, running rampant. And the DOD was finally getting to look into all the stuff that had been going on. I mean, because this had been like 6 years prior,
Right.
or more, actually. Well, in any event, I told my boss, and he was a uh, a younger boss. Wasn't that great a boss? Um, and he said, "Well, do your thing, manipulate the guy. We don't want to lose him as a source." So, I went back and I said, "Hey, don't worry about this. We'll figure out a way to get rid of it." And um, he assumed that I was going to be able to take care of that indictment, which for people that are watching, listening, a street agent can't get rid of an indictment. It's not like a cop in a traffic ticket.
Right.
I would have to pull the wool over or get approval from like 50 upper management, including the DOJ. So at the time, Taylor was being investigated by the DOD OIG, the Office of Inspector General. One day they call me and they say, "Hey, are you trying to get Michael Taylor off his indictment?" And I said, "No, no, I'm working with him." And they said, "Well, what are you working on?" And I said, "I can't go into it. Like it's classified. Have your boss call my boss or whatever you got to do." Now I know they have an investigation on him, so I'm assuming that it's a good one, and they're using all the techniques that they possibly can. But I already have a setup with my source and how we're contacting as he goes back and forth from the Middle East. So in my head, I'm like, all right, well, they're probably going to see this, our communications. But at the point, I'm talking around everything. And what they were hitching their wagon to was him saying to me, like in a text or an email, "Hey, how's it working? Are you getting this thing to go away?" And me saying, "Oh, yeah, yeah, don't worry about it. I got you." And I'm basically I'm lying to him.
Right.
In our world, we call it manipulation, but the bottom line is it's a lie.
Yeah.
I'm not doing anything to help him get off his indictment. So
Does he? But he feels like maybe you are.
yeah, 100%.
You're working on it.
Yeah. Now, in the same breath, a good source works the agent as well.
Right.
And it's like that's how the game is played. You're both working each other, and it's who's working who the best that wins. So he's also, giving us tidbits and saying, "Oh, I wish I could give you the whole thing, but I got this indictment, and I'm waiting." So he's playing the game too, and he's a very smart man, and he knows how the government works. So as it goes along, I I realize it's too much, and I want to close him out because I don't want to lie to the guy. So I asked my boss. I said, "Look, I want to close him. I don't want to deal with him." He said, "No, no, you can't. You can't close him." And I said, "Well, can I transfer him to another agent?" And he said, "No, he's only going to want to work with you." And at the time, my partner. Um, I even remember coming out one day after I met him, and I was like, "Yeah, he just offered me a job when I retire." And like I vocalized it, like it wasn't something that I was like, sneaking around. And eventually, what happened was it was like a perfect storm because 8 months prior to this, if you remember, Senator Stewart was in Alaska, and he had been investigated, and indicted by the what they call the PIG, which is like the Public Integrity Unit out of the DOJ and headquarters in Washington. And the Public Integrity Unit, the U.S. attorney that handled the case, started to like make up evidence in order
Okay.
to get the guy to be guilty.
Right.
And the FBI agent that was the case agent on the investigation blew the whistle on the U.S. attorney and said, "Hey, he's filling in the graham crackers with fluffernutter. You know,
Right.
this ain't a real s'more."
Right.
And the U.S. attorney ended up, it was a big, huge mess, and he ended up being investigated. And unfortunately, he took his own life.
Okay. With yeah. Okay. Always, it always amazes me when people do that because like they don't want to go to prison or something. But the truth is, you'd have probably gone to prison for a few years, and it wouldn't have been
If,
that big of a
if
deal.
even that, if even,
Right.
it might have been an administrative issue.
Right, I was gonna say, and they, but they can't imagine going from up here to down there. They're
Ego.
right. Your ego won't let them, so they kill themselves. Like to me, it's like that's insane. Like that's the leap you took.
Right, right. And unfortunately for me, his partner all of a sudden sees a dirty FBI agent in his sights and becomes the U.S. attorney working the case against me.
Okay.
So now they're coming at me like this, because they want revenge. And it it got ugly because the attorney that I hired was way over his head, and I didn't realize it until my SEPA hearing,
Well,
Confidential Information Procedural Act.
right. Well,
Basi-
how did we get there? Like, how did that whole thing unravel? How did he get onto you? Like, to me, so far, you haven't done anything wrong.
Right. So the their interpretations of our texts and emails led them to believe that because he offered me a job when I retired, that that we were going to do business together, or there were like business deals that might happen, um that he was bribing me. And because I was saying, "Oh man, don't worry, that's great, I would love to work with you, this, that, and the other thing, I can't wait to retire," um they basically believed my lies,
Right.
and it became, to my detriment. So they searched my house.
Well, can I ask you, like, how did they even get onto that? Like, who's reading these emails that said, "Hey, you know what? This sounds like, you know,
The
whatever,
the,
a
the
bribery."
investigators that were investigating Mr. Taylor were onto our communications,
Okay.
and
So they thought, "Hey, this sounds like he's bribing this agent."
to get him off his indictment.
So they started their own investigation. Okay.
Yeah, basically the OIG agent that was working against Taylor, who had spoken with me, and I had said, "No, you got it wrong. Like I'm not, like I'm doing my job, buddy, and
Right.
I can't go into it." He went to the public integrity unit and said, "Hey, I got a dirty FBI agent," and they were like, "Oh yeah, this is great." Like I can only imagine how they were after their colleague had, 6 months prior killed himself. So because an FBI agent blew the whistle.
Okay.
So through their interpretation of our communications, they decided that they had enough to indict us. And I was indicted. I was arrested on September 28th of 2012. I was put, it was obviously it's a Friday because that always happens. So they can wet you down on the weekend.
Right.
But I was put like in Manhattan Correctional Center, which is like a crap hole, and they shoved me in like a solitary confinement cell. And I stayed there for the weekend, and I got bond, $2.5 million.
How did they justify that high of a bond?
I have absolutely no idea. I have no
Okay.
idea. So my family was generous enough. We all like put up our houses, and um, I was released. I should take a step back and just say that my arrest was horrific. It was a felony car stop on my family, and I wasn't even in the vehicle. And they throw our two kids and my wife into the driveway at machine gun point because there were 25 U.S. Marshals, because I guess they thought I was like Jason Bourne and I was going to take them all out or something. And their background investigation was so poor. I wasn't even in the vehicle when
Right.
they did the felony car stop. So I hear screaming out in the street. So I'm coming around the backyard where I'm planting tomato plants for my wife, and there's 8 marshals pointing machine guns at me. One of them's yelling, "Get on the ground." The other one's yelling, "Put your hands up." The other one's yelling, like, "Do jumping jacks." I mean, they're all yelling something different, you know? And I got a shovel in my hand, and I'm like, I basically scream at them to shut up. And they finally shut up, and I say, "I'm going to put the shovel down. I'm going to lie down on the ground. I'm going to put my hands up. I'm going to face my palms up in the air." Like, I basically arrested myself.
Right.
I went through the motions so that nobody would get hurt. I went out. They took me out in cuffs, and read me the charges, which was conspiracy to obstruct justice. Um, and then they took me down to MCC. I ended up getting bonded out. Part of my bond requirement was I couldn't have any contact with any potential witnesses. Well, while I was away, one of my friends was on vacation, and he had met Michael Taylor, I think through a social event that I was at, that Taylor met me at. And, it wasn't like Taylor's identity needed to be hidden like some sources, because, it's Mike Taylor, high school football coach, private investigator. It wasn't a situation where, I couldn't hang out with the guy, so to speak. So my friend was away, and he comes back, and he had heard over the news that I was arrested, because it was all over all the newses. And he comes home he was overseas, and he pulls into my driveway, and I see him, and I walk out, and I'm like, "Hey, look, you can't be here. I'm not allowed to have anybody here." And he's like, "What's going on? What happened?" And I explain a little of it to him, and then he leaves. 9 months later, through the investigation, the public integrity unit interviews this guy, and he's like, "Look, you got it all wrong. Bob's like the greatest guy in the world. Matter of fact, when I visited him when I got home, when he was out on bond, and boom, they brought me into court and revoked my bond because I had spoken to a potential witness, my witness, but a potential witness nonetheless."
Yeah, that's such a fucking reach.
Yeah. Oh,
But I mean, that's,
totally.
you know,
Totally. But unfortunately, my case was out of Utah, which I had never been there. Like, how it became out of Utah was Mike Taylor's partner in that original indictment had bought a house in Utah. So ill-gotten gains in Utah for that indictment somehow made me involved to the point where my arrest, the case was coming out of Utah, which
okay.
made the nexus made no sense. I mean, so off to Utah I went on Con Air, and I had a special situation because I don't know why, but I didn't just get the shackles. I got the bar between the legs and the black box.
Yeah.
I got the full Hannibal Lecter treatment, except for the leather mask. And they stuck me in a county facility while I was awaiting to go to court in Salt Lake City. And I was in solitary confinement in a supermax wing for 17 months, 20 months, something like that.
Mm.
And I I finally got out into max security
I
where
mean, they couldn't, they revoke your bond, but they couldn't, like you didn't get a a court hearing where you could go in front of the judge and say, the guy pulled into my fucking into my driveway.
Yeah,
Like I just told him, hey, bro, you can't be here. I explained, look, I got arrested. There's an investigation. You may be a witness, so I can't talk to you. And then you would think that the judge would be like, okay, that's reasonable. Like, what are we doing here?
you would think.
Right.
But we're talking about Salt Lake City, and
Okay.
there's a whole nother mindset out there.
Okay.
And you're talking about a government employee, and you're talking about an area where righteousness is number one on everybody's mind, even though righteousness is a decision that they make arbitrarily. And not to be not to speak disparagingly about certain communities, but to be an FBI agent arrested in an area that's 90% Mormon, Latter-day Saints,
Mm-hmm.
is not really a great thing.
It's like I had a buddy that went to trial, and during voir dire, uh, they asked one of the juror members, "Can you be impartial about this?" And he goes, "I don't think so." And they said, "Why not?" And he goes, "Well, the guy was indicted on 30 counts of wire fraud. He did something."
Right,
And it's like, okay, just because I've been indicted and arrested doesn't necessarily mean that I've done anything fucking wrong. But people can't see that. Well, he was indicted.
right.
You can indict anybody.
The old saying, you can indict a ham sandwich.
Right.
I mean, literally, some of the indictments that I saw were like, when I was in, were like ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, in any event, I was out there. Michael Taylor was in a county jail out there as well. And I had made the mistake of not researching my attorney. And
Okay.
to be honest, I actually got my attorney on a recommendation from Michael Taylor, which, looking at it later on, was probably the second dumbest thing I've ever done in my life.
Right.
You know? So, first being taking the transfer, because the irony behind that whole Little League story and coaching is my son quit. So, I wasn't coaching anyways. So, it all came down to that SEPA hearing, Matt. And, my defense was I was doing my job. And I can prove that I was manipulating or trying to manipulate Taylor by showing them all the other cases where I had manipulated people into doing things through deception.
Right.
So at the hearing, the judge asked the prosecution, what are you going to do if I let Mr. Lustyik talk about his job? And they said, we're going to drop all the charges. So in my head, it was a Thursday. In my head, I'm going home. Like,
Right.
they don't want to hear the stuff that I've done. I mean, I could have got up on that stand and talked about a source that raped a woman. And when I went in and said, all right, well, let's close this guy down, management was like, no, we can't. Like sources that committed like serious crimes.
Right.
Because of national security and the information being provided, we were told to keep working them.
Right. You're going to let this guy keep roam the streets and potentially rape another American citizen because he's a source.
Which is what occurred. And I figured, I'm going to lay that all out, and a jury's going to see, hey, this guy, might be guilty of being a good liar,
Right.
but
He was
he didn't commit any crime. So she said she was going to rule on Monday. We came in on Monday, and it was a quick decision. She basically said, hey, Mr. Lustyik, everything in your head is property of the United States government. It's not going to come out in court. And when that happened, the assistant director of NSA, the CIA, legal team, the FBI, they all got up. They like looked at me, kind of waved, and walked out of the courtroom. And I knew that day that I was kind of done.
Yeah, you don't have a viable defense at that point.
No, no.
They get to
And,
present your case, and you have to sit there and just sit on your hands and keep your mouth shut.
and my lawyer was like, oh, maybe we'll figure out a way to talk around it, But I also knew that wasn't going to be allowed,
Right.
So at the same time, uh, my lawyer and I were not getting along. It was all about money, 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 money. I owe you money. You owe me money. You owe me money. You owe me money. He had done some things with my wife without me knowing, like financially. He had CJA, but he was still getting money from my wife.
Okay. So for anybody listening, that's basically as a court-appointed attorney, he's getting paid by the government, but he's still asking for more money. Yeah, that's not. I don't even think that's allowed.
No, it's not. No, it's actually a crime. But
Right.
but one that while you're going through what you're going through, you can't prove.
Right.
It's like not. I don't have the common sense, the wherewithal to like prove that at the time when I'm watching my entire life go into the toilet. So basically what happened was the judge, after I told the judge what was going on, we had a conference call, and the judge in that conference call said, look, Mr. Lawyer, what you're doing is borderline unethical. So you're off the case. And I got a court-appointed attorney. And what had happened right before that was, and this is like a nightmare. Like, if I start to cry, just don't start laughing at me.
No, bro, listen,
So
I cry like every other day.
like the trial they're gonna start picking a jury on Monday, and this is like Friday. My lawyer looks at me and he's like, "How did you meet Michael Taylor again?" And I was like, like I like started like convulsing, And I said, "Look, what is going on? Like, you don't remember? Like, we've been talking for almost 2 years now, and he's like my co-defendant. Like, you have to know what's going on." And he said, "Oh, I'm writing my opening statement, so I want to make sure I'm clear on it." And he was having myself and another attorney print out text messages from Discovery and writing on them like what it meant Friday before
Right.
Monday. So I knew I was done. And I said to him, what's going on? And he said, "You know what? You should change your plea to guilty." And I said, "Well, why would it, why?" And he said, "You're only going to get like, my offense level was a 15,
Right.
or 14. So that's like 15 to 21 months. You're only going to get 21 months. You've already done that. So this will be over with." And I said, "Are you sure?" And he's like, "Yeah, like this is going to be done. Just go in and plead guilty." So I talked to my wife and kids, and they had been distraught, the whole time. My children, my son saw their dad, who had been like a hero,
Right.
and now, it was the opposite. So I went in, My lawyer called the prosecutor and said, "Hey, my client is going to go in on Monday and change his plea to guilty. What can you give him?" And the prosecutor said, "Sounds like I don't got to give him anything."
Mm,
So my lawyer put the cart before the horse, and my dumbass, excuse my language, went in and pled open.
mm. Yeah, that was definitely a
The dumbest thing I've ever done.
yeah, and your lawyer sounds like it's just a complete moron. It's funny when I got my PSI, right? It was 32 years to life. And I went, so first of all, you can't get life for what I did.
Right,
And I went, I'll go to trial. And they were like, my lawyer's like, what? And I said, I might as well switch my plea. I mean, the most you can give me 32 years, and you're saying the low end is 32 years. I'll just go to trial. I can prove a lot of these enhancements aren't true, and I probably get myself sentenced to something a lot lower. And she was like, so she calls the prosecutor. Prosecutor actually has the Secret Service agent come down with my pre-sentence report to a meeting with my lawyer and the Secret Service agent, and we go over my PSR with her, and wow, she's like, okay, well, what do you think doesn't apply? And I'm like, this one. She's like, okay, this one, okay. And while we're there, my lawyer actually says, well, we can get rid of this 2-level enhancement because you can't charge him with like taking advantage of a vulnerable victim. You can't charge someone with vulnerable victim and charge him with over 50 victims. She said if, and she showed the actual enhancement and how it said you can't charge him with both. And then I immediately thought, why would you say that? Like, why would we tell them that? Why wouldn't we just get it as far down as we can? And when you go in and have the U.S. attorney agree to it at sentencing, then go in front of the judge and say, Your Honor, by the way, you also have to remove these 2 levels because you can't charge them with both of these enhancements. But like, she was such a poor negotiator that as soon as she said it, I thought, what did you just do? I immediately thought, what did you just do? Like, you just cost me like 3 years
right,
because you're such a bad negotiator. And that's the same thing. Like, oh, my client's going to plead guilty. What can you give him? No, you go in and say, listen, we've got this and this and this. I prepared my thing. We're ready to fucking go. Like, if you're going to make an offer, make it now, because when we start this thing, I'm telling you right now, we're going to clean your fucking clock. So I'm just calling up to let you know, if you want me to bring something to my client, let me know. And then have him say,
right.
listen, bro, if he just pleads fucking guilty, I mean, I'll cut him loose. Like, that's the way to go about it.
And
But
and
these
the,
guys have nothing. They have nothing on the line. That lawyer's got nothing on the line.
and the hardest thing about it is people don't understand the the chance you take when you go to trial in the United States. The whole idea of, fair trial is just ridiculous. When I learned about the term break you off, I was like, I can't, that doesn't happen in America. And what I mean is, let's say you have a 0 to 5 year, max is 5 years. In the United States, if you go to trial and lose, they can double, triple your your length of sentence because you went to trial.
Yeah.
And it's insane. In other countries, say like Canada, if it's 0 to 5, the max you can get is 5, and you go to trial. Like, they don't plea out; they go to trial, and then you'll get 5 years. In the United States, I had an offense level 14, 15 to 21 months. I was enhanced 10 levels because the job opportunity that I was going to get when I retired was a $200,000 a year salary, roughly. So that
Right.
was a 10-level enhancement. Um, I obviously was a public official, so that was another 3. I had to be the leader organizer because I was the case agent, so that was another 3. I went from a 15 to like you to like a 34. And for doing what? My
Right.
job? I mean,
Yeah.
it's insanity. And I understand why they have a 98% win rate, because, lawyers, even defense lawyers, especially public defenders, will tell their client, "Look, we can go to trial, but if you lose, they're going to break you off.
Yeah.
You're going to get your sentence doubled, and you're never coming out."
I,
And
yeah. I was gonna say, I can't tell you how many guys I know that were offered 3 years and went to trial and got 20 or
yeah,
got
yeah,
17 or got 19. Um, what do you? I mean, and it's like, how did you think I deserved 3 years, and then I went to trial and you gave me 19? Like that, the disparity is it's massive. And I was gonna say the other thing I always tell people is, so if you're guilty, you got a 100% chance of being found guilty. If you're innocent, you got about 50-60% chance.
I don't even think it's that high.
I know.
I mean, I think it's higher. Like,
Yeah,
I think you're guilty until proven guilty.
yeah,
Like, that's what I learned. And I mean, I look at it from, the other side of the coin. Like, federal courtrooms are set up specifically for intimidation. You have the judge up high, you
hmm
have the jury box right across on the wall. In every federal courtroom is the United States seal where it says, "In God we trust." They put that deliberately across from the jury box. The defendant is down low. He's furthest away from the jury. The whole thing is set up for to intimidate people into taking a plea.
It feels like it's the judge, jury, prosecution against this guy. So
Yeah.
it's wrapped around pointing at this
Yep.
guy.
Yep. And they really, you know, they have the advantage of, walking you in handcuffs. You're in, orange jumper or whatever you're wearing that day.
Yeah,
Um, even
you
if
look
it's
guilty.
yeah, I mean, you're guilty. You're guilty until proven guilty in the United States. 2% get away with, being innocent. But, the reason that these guys take all these plea deals is because, I'm a young African American male and I get busted for a drug crime. I have 80% of African American women, black women in America, 80% of them know somebody that's been indicted federally. Like, that's how
Right.
high it is in their community. So if I'm a kid from the street, I know a whole bunch of guys that have already gone in, and I know how the game's played. I know I'm going to get a plea agreement. I'm going to take it, and I'm going to do my time. I'm going to get out. In my world, in small town USA, where you're like a local hero and you're like an FBI agent, you don't know that that's how it works.
Well, and you think, it's funny. It's like, oh, you're innocent. Well, then you should have gone to trial.
Right, exactly. Well, if you're innocent, why did you plead guilty?
Right.
And the greatest irony is they tell you you can't lie, and then they make you lie. They they
Right.
they literally say you can't lie to us, so we're going to charge you with perjury. But when you go in to change your plea, lie. Like, stand up in front of the courtroom and throw yourself by saying how guilty you are.
Right. Because if you don't, now you lose your 2 levels of
Right.
responsibility. You
Right.
lose your. So it's, hey, we're going to throw another 2 to 3 levels on there. So that, and 2 to 3 levels, obviously every level you get is more and more months. So like, that extra level might go from 17 more months. And then you say, oh, no, now there's 2 more levels. It's not 17 twice. Now it's 17 plus an additional 19. Oh, no, it's 3. And if it's 3, well, then it's 17, 19, and 21 or 22. Like, it's just like, it just starts getting to be outrageous.
And I mean, you're in a cell and all you're doing is thinking about it.
Yeah.
And you get 10 minutes to talk to your spouse to come up with a decision. It's a 15-minute phone call. Or for me out in Utah, it was $35 every time I called home.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
So, it was like when I was thrown the bait that it was only going to be a 21-month sentence, and I listened to my children and my wife crying, I unfortunately took the bait and changed my plea.
yeah.
In my world, what I did, I think, at worst, would have been an administrative issue. You know, even if you know, even if it was what they say, how did it go from a level 14 to a level 34? I mean, that's just, it's unfair. It's unfair. And I don't want this to be about myself. I want this to be about like guys like you, other guys that are out there, guys that have gone through it. Look, the system is unfair. And you don't know it until you go through it. And when that happens, it's too late. Like it's like going into a porta john, right? You think you're going into a clean restroom. The porta john's a mess. You're sitting on the can and you're out of toilet paper. You don't realize you're out of toilet paper, so it's time to wipe.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, not to be totally disgusting, but I mean, that's what it's like. I mean, you realize, uh-oh, I need something, and whoops, it's too late. Like, I'm already done. I'm already going where I'm going. And so that's what happened to me. I After I changed my plea, I went and I was I did diesel therapy,
So
and
so what did you get?
15 years.
I'm sorry. Have you? You said you did diesel therapy.
Yeah,
You got sentenced and then got diesel therapy.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So what I also got diesel therapy because I went back and forth from New York to Utah like 7 times.
Mm,
So, anyways, I I ended up, bouncing through. I must have been to a dozen different jails and prisons, and ended up at Danbury Low, where I was told I'd never be able to go to a camp by the captain.
why is that?
I had a public safety factor for greatest severity for kidnapping.
For kidnapping?
Yeah,
Who'd you kidnap?
because because my as it was described to me, explained, my job. When you work counterterrorism, a lot of times you'll, I guess, take people and interrogate them or interview them or whatever it is. I don't know. So it looked like I was going to do my whole time, at Danbury. And one day I said, this doesn't make sense that I'm getting punished for my job.
Right.
So I wrote the judge, and the judge said that he recommended that the Bureau of Prisons remove the public safety factor. Two
Did
days
they?
2 days later, I'm in the chow line, and the captain calls me over, and he's like, "You're leaving. Roll up." And I was like, "Where am I going?" And he's like, "You're leaving tomorrow. You're going to a camp." And I said, "All right, I'd like to go to Otisville. Like that's my number one choice." And he said, "Lustyik, you're
Yeah.
not getting a choice. You're
Yeah.
going where I send you." And I ended up in Ferreton, New Jersey, which is like,
Oh, that's good.
yeah, it was 3.5 hours away from my house. And Otisville was 30 minutes.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah. So, but I was at a camp. So that was great. And I was at the camp maybe 2 years when I was sent on home confinement due to the CARES Act.
Oh, okay. So how much time had you done completely?
8,
8 years. Fuck.
yeah, 8. And I have a year to go on home confinement. I've been home, it'll be 4 years, I think, this June. Yeah, this June. So I think altogether I had to do 12.75 or something like that on a 15 year bid. So I have a year to go, and home confinement is a blessing, but it's also a curse.
Right.
People are always asking me what it's like, and the restrictions are real tough. Although I'm very lucky, my case manager is fantastic. Um, but it's like going to a strip club with a roll of quarters.
Right.
You know, you're gonna see the dancers, but you ain't gonna get asked to be up front.
Right.
And literally, that's what it's like. You know, I can put in for a request to go maybe to like my son's college football game or to the doctor or things like that. But it's not like I'm walking out of my house and I'm going anywhere socially or anything like that. But it's still not prison.
Yeah.
So it's a blessing for me.
Yeah. I was gonna say when I told my probation officer that I got married, and she's like, "Oh, okay." She said, "You going plan on going, or to go to a honeymoon?" And I was like, "No, no, we're gonna schedule something." She said, "Okay." She said, "Make sure it's close." I was like, I said, I can't go to Mexico. She goes, "No." And I said, I can't go to. I said, "What about Colorado? I could go skiing." And she goes, "That'd be nice." She said, "But it's probably not going to happen."
Yeah, and it's so arbitrary because you'll hear some guys, especially like in New York, where the probation officers are like swamped even more. You know, they'll get to go places.
Well, I can travel for work. So, I mean, she has to, like, I have to show her, here's the email, here's what's happening. These people want me to come to Los Angeles. I have to go, here's what I'm doing. I'm getting paid to do a keynote speech. I go through the whole thing, and then it's, what flight are you taking? When are you coming back? Where are you staying? What are the phone numbers? What are the addresses? How are you traveling? Everything. So it's like, man, like, this
Oh,
is
it's
so,
tough. And you know, another thing that was hard to learn is that the whole idea of hey, you did the crime, you did the time doesn't exist. What people, especially like from my world, don't realize is things like a credit card. You get a credit card and then they cancel it when they find out that you're a felon, or you might pose a risk in one way or another. You're When I was initially arrested, Citibank dropped us. Like they basically said, yeah, you're a high profile. Um, you violate our morals clause or something like that. USAA Insurance that I had been involved in 25 years dropped us.
hmm,
Things like that I can't help because I'm incarcerated, and it's all dumped on the people that are outside. In my case, my spouse.
right,
And people don't understand that the real victim on our side of things is our family.
right,
We get three hots in a cot. We're wherever we are, whether you're in a cell or whether you're in a dormitory setting, you're at a camp, whatever it is, you're still getting meals. You still got a place to lay your head. You're not paying bills anymore. You're not, doing anything like that. All you're doing is like trying to find magazines to read or read books or work out or, play cards or whatever you're doing. And it's
yeah.
your family that's suffering.
Well, I always say it's like it's anybody who has a relationship with someone in prison, it's such a one-sided relationship because all you can do is, can you send me this? Can you look up this? Can you call so and so? Can you do this? I mean, like if I wasn't a prick on the outside, if I wasn't a selfish prick on the outside, would put me in prison where all I can do is call you. Like I can imagine as soon as these people saw my number come up on the phone, they must have been like, fuck.
You're exactly right. I mean, it just forces you to be me, me, me,
Yeah.
because you have 15 minutes or 10 minutes, and you're lying in your bunk or you're sitting wherever you are all day long thinking about that call that's going to come that night. And all you can have running through your head is, what do I need? What do I need? What do I need? I mean, I can't tell you what an ass I was. How many times I was like, yeah, but did you put money on my books?
Yeah.
You know, oh, your son broke his arm. Yeah, all right, but is there money on my books? I mean, whatever was going on in the real world that they had to deal with, you don't even, it's in one ear and out the other because there's nothing you could do about it anyways. So you compartmentalize it. You kind of like just don't even hear it. You flush it, and you go right to, yeah. But did you call the lawyer? Did you sign me up for Sports Illustrated? Did you know? Is there money on my books? You know, and it's terrible. It's a terrible situation. And I mean, I came home. I don't know about you, but I came home when I was institutionalized
Oh yeah.
big time.
At for about 3 to 3:30 every day for probably the first year, I felt extremely anxious. Like I'm like I have to be in my cell to be counted. I have
Right,
to be like
right,
there are so many times during the day when I got this extreme anxiety, or even for the first month or so when the doorbell would ring or someone would knock. I remember thinking just instinctively, like they figured out they shouldn't have let me go. Like they're
yeah,
coming.
yeah.
That's the marshals coming to say, "Listen, Mister Cox, it's been revoked. We're grabbing you. You got to go." You
My,
know?
it's terrible. I mean, my wife, when I came home, she was like, can I ask you a question? And I was like, yeah, sure. What's up? She's like, why do you flush the toilet 15 times every time you go in the bathroom? And I was like, well, every time it hits water. And she's like, what are you talking about? Like the rules that you learn when you're in,
Yeah,
they just don't translate out in the real world. I mean, she said to me, why are you lining your shoes up under your bed? What, like you have a closet? And I was like, and then another time, Matt, I carried my toothbrush out to the living room. I like literally, I literally brushed my teeth. And then, you're used to like going in,
yeah.
taking it out,
Yeah.
and
You were probably standing there watching TV and holding your toothbrush and didn't think a thing about it.
there was another time where I took the roll of toilet paper out with me, and
Yeah.
another time I freaked out because my wife put two rolls of toilet paper on the desk right outside the bathroom I use, and I like started to like twitch because like you're used to like when you get to like a lower camp, they put that roll on your rack,
Right.
and all of a sudden I was like, why are you doing that? She's like, you need toilet paper. I'm like, yeah, but don't put it on the desk like that. She's like, you might want to go to therapy. And another, I mean, my relationship with my family was rough. I mean, especially my son. He's he was, when I left, he was a young boy, and every visit he asked me, "When are you coming home, Dad?"
Mm,
And I would have a motion in, and I was like, "I'm going to win this. I'll be home soon," and I
mm.
believed it. I was like 0 for 47. I mean, the only one I won was to go to a camp and to get the CARES Act. So I was 2 for 47. So I'm not going to the Hall of Fame as far as like violent motions. So I would say to him, "Oh, this is going to be it. I got this motion in. I know I'm going to win. I'll be home," and I would lose.
Yeah.
So it went on like that year after year after year. So he became skeptical. So everything that came out of my mouth, he was like, "Oh yeah," and he would like Google, like right in front of me, like, and he'd be like, "No, you're wrong. That's wrong." And there was one meal we were having, and we were at like the island in the kitchen, and he like reached across my plate to get the ketchup. I grabbed his arm and I like slammed it down on the island. I'm like, "What the fuck are you doing?" Excuse my language.
Yeah.
He's like, the ketchup. And I realized, in when you're in, you don't reach across somebody's food tray. Like you're
Right.
basically saying, "Let's fight," And I had brought it home with me. I had brought home a lot of those prison rules that make no sense. And even though I had been in a camp for 2 years, I still hadn't lost a lot of those rules. And it was something where I had to really, you know, take a hard look at myself and become a better person. This whole experience for me occurred because I let my ego take my soul. And I thought my poop didn't stink because I was an
Right.
FBI agent, and there were only 4,500 of us or something like that. And I I think at some point I was like above the law because I was the law,
Right.
and I got myself into a jam. There was a day my wife and I were talking about Michael Taylor, and she said, "Hey, this don't sound right. You should close this case." And I was like, "Nah, you don't know what you're talking about. I got this. Like, I'm gonna catch this terrorist. I'm gonna ride off on a white horse. I'm gonna be the hero again." And I ended up the goat. And it's my fault. Like, I'm not sitting here, talking to you saying I didn't do anything wrong. This is my fault. Like, I own up to it, and I don't want anybody who listen to us to think that I'm not. Like, I I own up to it. Like, I may not have deserved 15 years, but I deserved to have my ego brought down. I needed to be humbled,
Right.
and sadly, it took prison to do that.
Um, can I ask you a question? When you went to what, a low initially?
Yeah,
Okay. When you were at the low, like, did people know you were FBI?
it's a funny story. So when they transferred me across, the last place I was in was Pittsburgh or maybe Ohio, but it was not a nice spot. And
Right.
and they took me on a bus to Danbury alone, which is right away.
Odd.
Yeah, and everybody in intake, like all the orderlies, are like, "Oh wait, what's going on here?" I get to Danbury, and SIS comes to talk to me, and they're like, "Hey, look, don't tell anybody what you did. Don't let them know that you're with the FBI or this, you worked with the CIA or whatever you were doing. Like, nobody knows, nobody needs to know. If you see anything going on, let us know." And I was like, no, those days are over. Like, that ain't
Right.
happening. Um, and then they shut down the yard and walked me across to my unit,
Like,
right across the compound. They
right.
unlocked my unit door, and the inmate standing there looks at me and goes, "Hey, the FBI agent's here." So, I mean, it didn't even last a second,
Right.
you know? So, that being said, in the beginning, the rules are no sex offenders, no rats, and no cops in a TV room. So, I was in the TV room, and a shot caller came up and said, "Hey, you can't be in here." And I was like, "No, I'm good." And the second shot caller came and said, "Look, we got rules here. You can't be in here." And I said, "No, no, I'm going to be in here." Then it brought the white boy shot caller, and then all three of them were like, "Yo, dude, you can't be here." So the shot caller for the Bloods had one of his buddies with him, one of his boys with him, who needed to like earn stripes, like to move up. And they were like, "All right, well, how do you want to handle this?" And I said, "Well, let's go to the shower." So we went into the shower room, and they were The white boy said he said, "Who do you want first?" And I was like, "Well, let's just get it over with. Come on, everybody, let's just make it fun." And they they were like looking at me like I was crazy. Now, mind you, I'm not like a little guy,
Right.
and I'm relatively strong.
Right.
It actually saved me in a lot of different ways. So, anyways, they send the guy who needs to like move up the ladder, and without going into detail, I like took care of business. So I'm allowed in the TV room. So, but the next day I'm out in the yard, and about 20, guys that maybe are affiliated. I don't want to call anybody out. They come walking up to me, and I'm like, oh man. In my head, I'm like, this is it. Like, this is not going to go well. Maybe I'll take 5, 10 of them with me, but this is going to be a bad movie. And the shot caller comes up, and he's like, hey, I need to talk to you. And I was like, look, what do you want? And he's like, we don't want any trouble. We're wondering if you could like teach us a class, like what you did to that guy yesterday. Like, can you teach us that? And I was like, wait, what? Like, you want me to run like a
Self.
defensive tactics class, like in prison? I said, no, I can't do that. So that was like the second day. So that day I went into the weight pile, into the weight room. And
They have a weight room.
yeah, Danbury used to be a female prison, and they switched it over to men. So they had a weight room, but the weights only went up to like 35 pounds, and like it was a weight room.
Right.
And I was excited because back in the day, I had won a couple bodybuilding shows. I had been a football player. I was a big weightlifter. I walk in, all Jamaican guys, and big Jamaican comes walking over to me. Big, huge guy, dreadlocks. He's like, yo, what car are you in? And I was like, uh, he's like, what car are you riding in? And I was like, Chevy Tahoe. Like, I had no idea what it meant because I had been in solitary and stuff, like,
Right.
and out in Utah, there aren't any minorities except for Polynesians. That I never saw a black guy the whole
Right.
time I was in Utah prison. And um, they were all laughing at me, and one guy stepped forward. He's like, "Oh, you're the Fed. You're the Fed." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm the Fed. Yeah, like I guess, yeah." So they let me work out, and I like put 315 on the bench, and I like crushed it like 22 times. And they realized, wow, this guy. And it was like the only time I've ever done that in my life, that many times. Like I knew this is it, man. I got to do this right now. Like this is it. Like where's my adrenaline? And I gotta make this work. Long story short, I ended up working out with 4 of the shot callers and me, like a Latin king, a white boy, a blood, and an FBI agent. Like
Right.
that was our workout car, and I ran recreation. I was the head of recreation. This is a funny story. One day, I'm uh, I'm setting up for floor hockey because they had floor hockey, and I put the goalie equipment on just for like giggles, and the guys are shooting on me, and I'm like saving everything. So one of the guys from like the Genovese family comes up and he's like, "Hey, there's a Christmas tournament coming up. You want to be our goalie?" And I couldn't stop laughing. And he's like, "What are you laughing at?" I said, "Like every movie we've ever seen, every mob movie. Like I'm the FBI agent. Like you're the mob guy. Like I can't be your goalie." And he's like, "Come on, man, you're really good." So I was like, "All right, what the hell?" I did it just because it was like something to tell people.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I do it just for the content.
Yeah, I literally did that. So we win 4 games, and I'm like playing like going to the Hall of Fame. I mean, I'm saving everything. And we got the final game coming up, and it's like 2 nights away. And I'm sitting in my recreation office, and the CO comes up, and he's like, "Man, Lustyik, I can't believe you're like going to be the goalie in the championship game for the mob guys, like the Italian guys." And I was like, "Yeah, me either." He's like, "Yeah, they got they got big money on that game." I was like, "What?" Like, "Yeah, they got like 140 grand in that game." And all I saw was like me letting up like 10 goals and then my family disappearing. So I got to tell you, Matt, I looked around that recreation office and I reached up in the cabinet and I grabbed a 3-hole punch and I smashed it onto my hand right in front of the CO. And I said, "I need to go to medical." And he looked at me and he was like, he takes me to medical. Now, medical in prison, like, it ain't
Yeah,
medical.
yeah, yeah.
So the PA in medical is like, "Oh, I'm just gonna put tape on it." And the CO's like, "Nah, put him in a cast." And he's like, "No, no, no. The 2 of his fingers are broken, but he doesn't need a cast. I'll just, I'll tape him up." And the CO, probably saved my life, was like, "Nah, put him in a cast." So he casted me up, and I went back out on the yard, and the CO told the story that a filing cabinet had, when we were moving it, had landed on my hand. So I got out of that game, and I mean,
What the Italian guys were you just like, man, I'm sorry, I wanted to be there for you guys
yeah.
too.
Oh no, they came to me. They were like, "Oh my God, we can't believe this happened, man. We feel so bad." Like they were like legitimately like, nice to me. And
Yeah.
the funny thing is, you would think that like my life would have been a living hell.
Right.
But I gotta tell you, and people need to understand it, I actually met better men in prison than I sat next to in like FBI offices. I
Yeah.
mean,
I
they were
believe
like
that.
higher, like they were good men. Like I met good men, and I made lifelong friends. And I really, people need to understand that, because you can't judge someone for a moment of unclarity, because we all have it. It's
Right.
just that some people, when they lose their moral compass for that moment, really mess up and get caught. Other people, become U.S. congressmen. I mean, it's really just a matter of where you are and what time it is.
Right.
It could go either way. It could go either way. And I saw a lot of guys whose paperwork was screwy, who's had FBI paperwork that I knew was wrong. At one point, we helped the guy get out. I talked to his attorney because I knew that the FBI had, erroneously done some of this paperwork. He ended up, winning and getting himself out. Um, the men treated me based on who I am and like how I treated them. I mean, at the low, units were released to the chow hall based on how you did in the weekly inspection.
Right.
We were last, like every week when I was there. And finally, I was like, "Screw this," and I started cleaning the showers and the toilets, and we started winning.
Right.
And all those guys that had a problem with me because I was a cop or a fed or an agent, all of a sudden I was feeding them. And they started to be like, "You know what? This guy ain't some asshole cop. He's like on his hands and knees cleaning a toilet. And I'm getting the benefit out of it because I'm going to the chow hall first and not last where there's nothing left."
Right.
And, they started to show me respect, like a lot more respect. And my time there, I had a couple situations, but only one physicality. Ironically, the other ones were cleared up by members of the group organization that the individual who was having a problem with me was from. They would come up and be like, "Yo, you don't want to mess with that guy,"
Right.
and it would go away. And I was treated great. I mean, the funny thing is, like, the upper management had more of a problem with me than like inmates, because you have captains and stuff in the BOP that probably had applied to the bureau or other
Right.
agencies and didn't get the job, and then here I am, the dirty FBI agent, and so I hope people don't judge guys that come out just based on the one mistake they might have made, because there are a lot of great guys. I mean, sure, there are a lot of dirt bags, but there are also a lot of great guys. You know.
Yeah. No, definitely. And just like you, I mean, I've probably, some matter of fact, to be honest, I don't really even know or hang out with anybody that I didn't meet in federal prison at this point. You know, I mean, so you kind of froze. Oh, okay. Never mind. Yeah, I was going to say it's funny because like I always joke around and say it's because the decent people don't want to be around me, you know, and the thing is that I don't really want to be around them either. Like I like, it's, it doesn't bother me, but when I hang out with regular people, my wife and I went to this thing the other day. This guy at the gym invited us to go to like a party at this place called the Crates, which is like a outdoor mall, and he does it once a year, I think. And so we went, and so I saw these people because I met this guy at the gym, and there's tons of people at the gym, and they, you see them to nod, you see them every morning, so you nod at them and stuff, but you don't really talk to them. And so now you get a chance where they come up and they start talking to you. And I never shy away about being in prison. Usually it starts with the whole, oh, what do you do for a living?
Right.
Oh, well, I run I have a YouTube channel. Oh, okay. What do you talk about? What's that? I'm like, oh, it's on true crime. Oh, how'd you get into that? Like, not that I'm avoiding it. I just know the natural progression of the conversation. I said, oh, well, I got into some trouble, and then I went to prison. I did about 13 years, and they're like, I'm sorry, what? You were what? Then they're like, well, wait a minute, you were in prison for 13 years? I'm like, yeah, got out a few years ago, started a channel. And so I interview other guys, and they're like, well, what did you do? I'm like, oh, it was bank fraud. And, I kind of give them a very brief, the 3-minute version. And even then, you can tell their entire tone changes.
Oh yeah.
Like, because we must have met 6 or 7 different people that we see every single day, or at least 6 days a week. And they completely like became standoffish and okay, and like the relaxed giggling and laughing and having a good time completely changed on each one of them. And it's but if some guy's been in prison, you don't get that. They're
No.
very, hey, what's up with such and such, and hey, and it's very familiar. And if you say something that's, a normal person is put off by, they're not put off by that.
No.
They meet like, oh, bro, what'd you do? What happened? Where'd you go? Oh, okay. It's a completely different feel because they've been through the experience, and it bonds you to them.
Oh,
So,
100%, 100%. Because you know everybody's hell is relative, but when you're
right.
inside, everybody's in hell.
Yeah.
Like, we're all in there together, and I always feel that, like, when you find yourself in hell, keep walking.
Right.
And a lot of those guys that I was in with, we did that walk together. And now that they're out, I was able to help a lot of the guys get, like, certified as personal trainers. They've started their own businesses. Um, you know, I try to do as much as I can to help the guys that I knew that were in that are out now, because recidivism is a real right in your face kind of deal, because it's so hard when you get out to do anything. it's crazy. People like yourself that are so successful, it's like fantastic to see. But there's like 100 other guys that don't want to work at Walmart. Not that there's anything bad about working at Walmart, but they don't want to. They can't survive, and they
Right.
just get driven back to the street
Yeah.
for whatever reason. They don't have a support system. All these things you heard about on inmate.com about, there's all these grants you can get when you get out, or the government will help you. They're going to help you get back into society. You can get a free college education. There's all these things you can do. They don't exist,
No. No.
and if they do, they're buried so deep that I can't afford to buy the shovel to get to them,
Yeah.
and it's sad. And it's sad all the way through, Matt. I mean, a CO in the federal prison system gets paid less than an FBI secretary.
Mm.
So that guy walks into work every day and has to listen to crap, and then has to go home and listen to his spouse and her crap because they're barely making a check to check. And then they wonder why you might have a CO that gets dirty. And
Right.
they talk about like, there's so much drugs in prison. Well, in my opinion, if you cut the head of the snake off, you don't have to feed it anymore. So if you paid COs what they're worth, because it is a dangerous job, I don't care what anybody says, things can go wrong so quickly.
Right.
And if you paid them what they were worth, the temptation might go away. And then you may not get guys, as many guys having trouble with K2 or drugs that are in there, or a lot of problems I think would go away if COs, were, in my opinion, paid like what they're worth. And when I speak about this, guys that were in are like, what are you talking about? Like COs, like, why are you on their side? And that's like the unique perspective I get from being on both sides of the coin, is that I see that, these guys, at the camp, we had 150 guys. One of the guys went into a seizure outside of the basketball court. Everybody surrounds him. Nobody's like actually, helping him. And our CO is a pregnant female, like 8 months pregnant.
Right.
She's the only CO.
Yeah.
So now she's on the ground trying to help this guy who's having a seizure. And the guys just keep moving in. Not that they're going to do anything, but they want to, see what's going on or help or whatever, whatever it is, support the guy that's having a seizure. And in my head, I'm thinking like she's thinking, I'm like, oh my God, she must be terrified because she's starting to like snap around and look around. So what do? I go in because I have some training. I go in and I like show her like, bend his knees, move him here, do this, do that, and, I committed the ultimate offense. I touched another inmate. So believe it or not, like the next day I'm in the lieutenant's office and they're thinking of like writing me up. And she came to my defense and she was like, I'm 8 months pregnant and I'm working the camp by myself. I was terrified and this guy helped me. You should be rewarding him, not writing him up. So, it all went away. But my point is, they have a dangerous job. I mean, even at a camp, because there's some campers that move their way down, as you know, and they still got paperwork in there. And you don't know when that mail call comes and that guy gets, his denial from the court. And then somebody says something to him and they think they're joking around. and they don't realize the lousy day he's having, that guy could pop off. And if he pops off in a camp, by the time that CO hits the red button, it's like 15, 20 minutes before they come from the medium.
Right.
You know, like COs have a dangerous job. The FBI, people think, oh, that must be so dangerous. We do our homework. We'll sit outside your house. We'll turn your power off. We'll turn your water off. We'll wait. We got all the time in the world. You know, we'll show up with 100 agents. COs, they don't get that opportunity. You know, they got to react right away. So I I know it's not a popular argument, but I really feel that they're underpaid and they're undervalued. And the sad thing is, a lot of them are former military.
Right.
So, what kind of value are we giving, to our veterans if we get them out of the military and they're now making the same amount as they were as an E5, only now they're getting taxed out the, wazoo? I don't mean to preach, but I want to make sure that, it's clear that um, I have regret and for what I did to my family and my friends and my career. But I also know that it's not that I'm glad it happened, but it made me a better man.
Right.
I
I can see.
really,
I can see that. I mean,
I,
I feel I feel the same way. Like I don't feel like I needed to do 13 years, but I feel like it put life in perspective for me.
me as well. Like I said in the beginning, my ego destroyed my soul. Like I was a person who always tried to do the right thing for people, and I always want to help people. And that person got lost because my ego was so strong that I needed to have that one last big case. And it led me down a path I should have never went down. And I was manipulated by the person I thought I was manipulating. And I regret that it happened, but like I said, I'm glad I was humbled. And I'm glad I really like the person I am today. And I don't think the person I am today would like the person I was. I don't think they'd get along. I really don't.
That's
So
interesting. Yeah, I like that. That's an interesting thought.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean it's crazy, but it's true. You know, I I was I was that asshole FBI agent. You know,
Yeah. I did you ever see the movie The Big Short?
yeah, a long time ago.
At one point, one of the guys goes down to Florida and he's interviewing brokers. And they interview like these three brokers, and they're all young, good looking guys. And they're like, the guys ask him like, well, who are you doing these loans for? And they're like, like I basically focus on strippers, bro. Like, and the other one's like, yeah, I'm straight illegal. You know what I'm saying? No doc, no documents, zero down, like, high interest rates. Me, yeah. Then the other guy's like, me, I totally, they're like, well, how are they getting these loans? Oh, I stick them with boys, bro. I stick them with variable rate mortgages, get them in there, tell them this, you know what I'm saying? And when I watch that movie, I think those were my brokers.
Yeah.
Like that, they were all my brokers were douchebags. I had 12 douchebags, and these were the guys. And at the time, I loved them. I thought they were great. But I look at them now and I go, wow, you were douchebags.
Yeah, like you wouldn't like them.
No,
Yeah.
it's funny too. I think about that all the time. I think I couldn't stand to be around those guys now.
Right.
So, and they're all driving BMWs. They got the right clothes. Their hair's perfect. They got the whole, and I just think, God, bro, like what was important then is so not important now.
And the way you learn that lesson the fastest is when they never visit you and they never
Oh, yeah.
write you.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait a minute, I gave you that BMW. I gave you
Yeah.
that Porsche. I gave you that opportunity. and you can't even take the time to go on core links, or you can't even like write a letter, or come visit me, and it sinks in quick. Like
Yeah.
it's a quicksand in your mind. Like these people do not give a rat's ass about me.
Yeah.
And you really see the people that care about you when you come out of prison. Like I'm fortunate. My community embraced me. And
Right.
that's because when I left, I was, a small town hero, for lack of a better term. And I came home and they saw the same person, and they they didn't judge me. The ones that do, I don't know. I don't hang around them. The
Right.
ones that, cared about me then, care about me now, I know because they showed up at my house when I got home,
Right.
and it's just such an eye opener when you go through prison. There's so many days you walk around with your eyes wide open. It's like, I can't believe this. I can't believe it's like this. I can't believe they did that to me. I can't believe my friends are gone. I can't, it's just. I can't believe.
Yeah.
I was talking in a toilet. I tell people that story and they're like, what? I was in solitary confinement and I'm lying in my bunk and I hear voices. I hear my name and I'm like, I'm losing it already. I've been here like 3 days. I go over to the toilet and I hear empty out the water, empty out the water. So I'm like, all right. I empty out the water in the toilet into the sink because they're combined. And I realize in prison, a toilet is a phone,
Right.
you know? And I talked to this guy who I never saw, I never met in person. I only know his first name. And he taught me all about prison and what to expect, what to do, what not to do. And the guy like saved my life. And literally, he's a toilet. Like he's a voice in
Oh,
a toilet. I mean, it's it's
oh, I
surreal.
when I was locked up in it's called Atlanta City Detention Center. They call it ACDC. There were guys that would say, "Bro, what time is it?" And I'd be like, it's almost 7." They go, "Oh, I gotta go." And I go, "Why?" They go, "I got a date." Because like 2 stories up was the women's floor.
Oh yeah.
So they would have a date where some girl in like, whatever, room number 21 would go to the girl in room number 19 and they'd empty out the toilet and they would have a date and for an hour.
I mean, it's crazy.
Insane.
Never. If somebody told me, "Oh yeah, you're going to be talking into a toilet like in a month," I would have been
That's
like,
not
"What
gonna
are you
happen.
talking about?"
Yeah.
And I look forward to it every day. I'd be scooping that water out. I mean, it was when you look back, it's ridiculous. But look, that guy saved my life. He
Right.
saved my life. I mean, he taught me everything. And if you're out there listening to this, thank you because
Toilet guy.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
Look, it's a great opportunity for me for people to hear what I went through because the lesson really is, listen to your soul before you listen to your ego. Like when you got something in your head telling you, don't do this, don't do it. Like listen to your gut, basically, not your ego. My whole case is because of my ego, and I regret it. I appreciate people like yourself because it gives me the opportunity, you know, to maybe change somebody's mind who might be about to do the same stupid thing or something similar. And it's people like you that you have this way of getting the message out that's so important, and I don't think you give yourself enough credit for like how many lives you can actually change, because there's so many people out there that probably listen to your show and it makes them think with clarity and possibly not do something that maybe they were thinking of doing that they shouldn't. And that's a huge thing. And like I said in the beginning, you might have touched a lot of money in your previous life, but now you're touching a lot of lives. And that makes you a huge success, Matt. And I appreciate having the opportunity to spend time with you.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. Hey, I appreciate you guys watching. Do me a favor, hit the subscribe button. Please leave a comment, share the video, and check out my Patreon. Thank you very much for watching. See ya.